Hi everybody, this is my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank, and I don't shoot much video of it. I'm not really sure why. I've got a lot of cool fish in here, I got a lot of interesting stuff going on, and it's one of my older tanks. This is one of the first tanks that I set up when I really got interested in fish keeping, and it's had a lot of different things in it over the years. That's why it's called my miscellaneous tank. But it's had a fairly stable population for the last couple of years. I haven't really messed with it or done anything. It was sort of like my starter experimental tank where I was, losing a lot of fish due to very, very poor fish keeping, inexperience, wrong fish, too many fish, you name it. I went through a lot of fish early on in my hobby. And eventually this tank sort of stabilized into what it is now. And it's been this way for quite a while. This is just one of my tanks that runs over so smoothly and has just sort of been there so long, it's almost just kind of become part of the background. I almost don't even notice it. It is such a non-issue tank with me. And that's not to say I don't enjoy it, and I don't actually spend quite a bit of time watching it. I really, really enjoy the Loaches I have on the bottom. They always hide whenever I get a camera out. It's really difficult to get them on film. I actually have to set up my better camera at a little bit of a distance and zoom in and then just walk away and let it record. That's about the only way I can really get good video of my Loaches. So as you can see, it's a beautiful tank. It's crystal clear. The plants in there kind of do whatever. I didn't really know what I was doing when I stuck them in there. Those plants have literally been in there for years. It's a non-planted substrate, it's just that inert fake gravel. This tank, I just really don't do anything with it. It just sort of does its thing the way it does. I've got some Otocinclus in there. I have a rubber lip on the bottom, rubber lip Pleco, which is an all-flux grazer. And that tends to keep everything sparkling clean. I've got some wood in the bottom. I've got some more wood sitting up here on these rocks. Some white cloud mountain minnows, some neons. I did have a mated pair of angels in here. That's the male. I lost the female not too long ago, I believe due to old age. And they spawned frequently in here. So now that we've had a look at the tank and we see how beautiful and clear and pretty it is and how healthy all the animals look, we are going to go over and look at some water parameters. I've been doing some water changing and some testing on this tank today, and what we're about to go look at may be a little surprising, a little shocking, but the goal is for me to basically embarrass myself into taking a little better care of this tank. This is one of my most neglected tanks, despite the fact that I sit right next to it and do work on all the other tanks here in my fish room, while this one just sits here and ticks over. So let's go over to my test station and have a look at some vials. Alright, so what are we looking at here? The vial here on the far left is my original pH, and this is the current pH of the tank. This is the original nitrates, and this is the current nitrates. Now, that would be surprising enough if this were simply a water change, because that is a pretty drastic drop from this very, very dark red to the upper end of orange. We're borderline red, but that's about as far as we're going to go today, and I'm going to explain why in just a moment. I started by doing a simple water change, about 20%, and when I did, I got this vial, which is very, very red, much more red than I normally see in my vials. So I decided it was time that we do a little more of a water change. So after my 20% water change, I went back and I did another 20% water change. Now keep in mind that this does not equate to doing a 40% water change. I've done a 20%. I've now put new water back in the tank. So when I did the second 20%, I'm pulling some of that new water back out. So it's not a full 40% when you do two 20% back to back. After the second 20%, the vial was still so red that I couldn't tell the difference between the original and the after. So I went back and I did a third water change of about 30%, and that's where we sit now. My pH is really beginning to shift. Again, this is my starting at about 6.8, and we are now up to about 7.2. So not only have I shifted it significantly, I've gone across that neutral line. So we're not going to do any more today. I don't even want to shock the fish too much just by stressing them out in this huge reduction in dissolved solids in their water, because nitrates do account for total dissolved solids. So that can impact their osmoregulation and a lot of different things within the physiology of the animal. So you don't want to do too radical of any kind of shift, but I did want to get those nitrates down to at least a reasonable level. So we're now down to, I'm going to call it around 40 parts per million from who knows where, maybe 80. So let's go have one last look at the tank, and I will give you my final thoughts as to what all of this means. Alright, first of all, I want to reiterate what I often say, and that is that my channel is not intended to be an instructional how-to type channel. You can certainly learn from what I do, but I'm not necessarily saying this is how you should do it. I'm simply showing you how I do it, good and bad. I show you my mistakes as well as my successes. And in this case, I've already mentioned, this video is not really designed to show you, hey, it's okay to run your nitrates through the roof. It's more designed to have me have to go, sorry everybody, look at this. I try to keep these beautiful tanks and everything, but I too I neglect some of my tanks sometimes, and those nitrates really do get up there. Now my tanks upstairs are probably in a similar condition. I did a little work on them a week ago, so they're probably not terrible. But judging by the repeated water changes I did on this tank before I was able to bring those very high levels down under control, then it's probably safe to say that the water changes I did upstairs amounted to the same thing. When I was done, if I had taken a nitrate test, I probably still would have had a very red vial. So I think it's time for me to really just sort of start paying a little more attention and trying to keep these tanks a little more nitrate free. Now, by nitrate free, I mean just reduce the amount that's in there. I often say that 40 parts per million is around where I consider the cap. I also think there are several fish out there that are very, very sensitive to nitrates. So if you have those types of fish, you probably already know this in advance, and you keep your nitrates under 10 parts per million. But for most of us, 40 parts per million is an acceptable level, but it really is also the upper end of the acceptable level where you really want to start getting in there and thinking about doing a water change. So, having seen what you just saw, also keep in mind what I often say, and that is if you happen to check your water on a Friday afternoon and you see that your nitrates are getting up there at 40, 50 parts per million, you don't have to cancel your plans for the weekend to get in there and start doing water changes. You can put it off for a day or two. It's not critical for most fish until those nitrates start getting up into the hundreds of parts per million. It is a long-term detriment to the animals. It does affect their health in a long-term sense, and there are other associated dissolved solids. As the nitrate levels rise in the tanks, so do other things, I'll say. It could be bacteria, it could be protozoa, it could be phosphates. There's a lot of other stuff that builds up and accumulates along with those nitrates. So the nitrates are a good proxy to knowing what else is going on in your tank. So if your nitrates are through the roof like mine were, then a lot of other things are probably really elevated as well. And you just don't want that in a generalized sort of way. You really want to keep your nitrates around 40 parts per million or lower. So there's my video. It was a nice little look at my 29. It really is still just a beautiful tank, and I really do like this one a lot. So once again, I'm a little embarrassed by having to show you that bright red vial, but there it is. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend that that's not what it looks like. That's what it looked like. So make what you want out of all that. Go ahead and subscribe now if you're not already. That way you won't miss anything I got coming up. I do have quite a few videos I'm working on this weekend, and you don't want to miss any of them. So thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you real soon on the next one.